Wow, listening to everyone quiet down. Ooh. Good afternoon, everybody. All right. I'm welcome here. I am Jonathan Overpeck. I'm the Samuel A. Graham Dean of the School for Environment and Sustainability at the University of Michigan. And just to make sure you know you're in the right place, we have a very special guest for our annual Wege lecture fireside chat today. And that would be the former U.S. Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm. Yay. I'm going to give us lots of chance to clap, because I know everyone in Michigan likes to clap when it's really beautiful out. But I'd also like to start by acknowledging the land we're on today. The University of Michigan is located on the traditional territory of the I can't believe I can't say this word. Someone help me out. Anishinaabe, thank you. I've said it only about 1,000 times. In 1817, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations made the largest single land transfer to the University of Michigan. Through these words of acknowledgement, their contemporary and ancestral ties to the land and their contributions to the university are renewed and reaffirmed. A commitment to building an equitable and sustainable future is at the center of our work in SEAS. And we understand that this can only be accomplished by building authentic relationships and partnerships with Indigenous peoples. For example, we have a memorandum of understanding with the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians to commemorate their new research center, the Consortium for Cooperative Ecological Research. Doing this without my glasses is fun. Housing the Global Center for Climate Change and Transboundary Waters at Seas is a partnership involving research teams from the Red Lake Nation, Menominee Nation, 6 nations of the Grand River, Canada, and the US. And beyond North America, SEAS has significant collaborations with Indigenous peoples in many countries, including Nepal, Kenya, Indonesia, New Zealand, Cameroon, the Philippines, Bangladesh, Thailand, among others. As a climate scientist, that's me, there has never been a more important time for coming together for our planet. I'd like to thank the over 35 units across campus who have collaborated with us on Climate Week. A special thank you to the Office of the Vice Provost for Sustainability for partnering with us to make this a reality. I'd like to also tip my hat to the Center for Sustainable Systems, who established this Wege lecture and continues to ensure its success year after year. And I'd like to thank our co-sponsors at the Gerald R. Ford School for Public Policy for being part of tonight's event. To those who are here from state and local government and community organizations, I appreciate your partnership and help in getting the job done. And to the representatives from the Wege Foundation who are funding tonight's lecture and fireside chat, and to Peter Wege, who started our relationship, I commend your enduring support, not only for this lecture at the University of Michigan, but for advancing sustainability across our state and around the globe. The stakes are high, the science is clear, and unfortunately, the window for meaningful action is rapidly closing. But here we are, scientists, students, staff, policymakers, business leaders, NGO leaders, activists, community members, community leaders, united in the belief that we can and must do better. We are here today because we know something essential. No one can solve the climate crisis alone. Not a single nation, not a single field, not a single generation, and certainly not a single person. The only way forward is together, breaking down barriers, working across disciplines, and uniting as one for the planet we share. This is a call to action for all of us. When I look around the room at all these people, all of you, I feel energized, I feel charged. Together, we're a freight train for the future. You can throw obstacles in our path, you can put the obstacles on the tracks, but you can't stop us. You can't stop the momentum we are building. Because we will not waver, we will not give up, because the future of our planet is worth fighting for. Tonight's event, it's almost tonight, wraps up an incredible day of climate and energy-themed activities as part of the U of M's first ever Climate Week. This is more than an event. It is a statement that the University of Michigan and everyone gathered here is ready to lead to make climate action happen and to solve the climate crisis. I hope you will all join us for more Climate Week events. You can visit climateweek.umich.edu for a full lineup. And with that, I'd like to turn it over, is she there?
I'm here.
To Liesl Clark, the C's Director of Climate Action and Engagement, who conceived the idea of having a Climate Week at the U of M and helped bring us all together to make it happen. Thank you, Liesl.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate the introduction, to do the introduction. So good evening. I'm so excited to see such a full house here tonight for the important conversation we're going to have. I've been asked, before I give you another introduction, to read the following University of Michigan Freedom of Expression statement. The University of Michigan strives to create a truly open forum, one in which diverse opinions can be expressed and heard. It is the right of members of the university community, speakers, artists, and invited guests to express their views at the university. We will protect the rights of individuals to speak, the rights of the members of the university community who wish to hear and communicate with an invited guest. Those who disagree or wish to protest the viewpoints of the invited speaker have a right to express their opposition in appropriate ways, both within this building and within the facility. However, dissent must not interfere unduly with communication between a speaker and the audience. If the hosts of today's program, in collaboration with the university representatives, believe that the protesters are interfering unduly with the speaker's freedom of expression, those protesters will be warned by a university administrator. If warnings are not heeded and interference continues, the individuals responsible may be removed from the building. Thanks for your attention, and we appreciate your cooperation. Now, I'd like to turn to our Wege speaker, who truly needs no introduction, but I'm going to give you one anyway. She is a visionary and dynamic leader at the state and federal level, who said that I shouldn't say any of this, by the way, in the green room. She said I should just say her name. But she knew over 20 years ago that we needed to be forward-thinking about what is inherently Michigan and how our strengths could serve us in the future. Jennifer Granholm wrote us a roadmap during her term as governor, and she inspired our large swath of Michiganders, me included, to pick up that work. Then she used that experience to be the architect of the energy transition on behalf of the entire nation as U.S. Secretary of Energy. Her vision shaped my career and gave me the outlines to color in, working both in the public and private sector and now in academia. Let's reflect on her initiatives, though, that built a better Michigan. Her laser focus on education, her dedication to the environment in the Great Lakes, and her leadership to get the Great Lakes Compact 2001 Annex over the goal line. Imagine getting 8 governors and 2 premiers to agree on anything today. And her absolute passion for a clean energy future and the opportunity that affords the people of Michigan and beyond. She dove deeply into how do we reshape Michigan's economy in ways that would serve all people in the future, leaning on our advanced manufacturing and innovation strengths to grow the burgeoning clean energy space. In fact, she brought together a group of clean energy leaders in 2010, you can read about it in her book, and pushed and prodded them to organize themselves and speak up for policy that would expand clean energy manufacturing and deployment. That meeting turned into the Michigan Energy Innovation Business Council that started in that room and grew to what is now a 160 business trade member association. And just last week, they celebrated their 13th annual gala. So why do I share that? Because it grew from her amazing vision that day. However, Jennifer Granholm would remind us that policy matters. EIBC was perfectly positioned to play a major role in the passage of the Clean Energy and Jobs Act in 2023, legislation that put Michigan on the map a second time, cementing our clean energy goals, developed in the My Healthy Climate Plan, into statute. And that's one example of how her impact grows even now. In fact, Michigan's clean energy economy is at 143,000 jobs. Because Jennifer Granholm's core values are around making the world better for future generations through education, clean energy deployment, environmental protection, but she really seeks to operationalize these outcomes, and that is a step that many leaders skip. Of course, she continues to make policies concrete in her role, as she did in her role as U.S. Secretary of Energy, where she connected the two phrases that I attribute to her most: deploy, 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 and policy matters. She's in this work for the long haul, but the way we measure leadership is not by longevity, but by impact. When we negotiated the first renewable portfolio standards for Michigan, PA 295 in 2008, the cost of solar was too high to be built. Coal was by far the cheapest generation source, and we wrote a variety of off-ramps into that statute when renewables were too expensive. Guess what? Because of a focus on improving technology, streamlining deployment, new approaches to financing, and policy, the off-ramps were never used, and solar's come down 90% from that time to be the cheapest energy generation resource. In fact, in Michigan, we're up to 8,300 megawatts of renewable generation, a 41% increase just in the last 2 years, and we're on track, because of the foundation laid by this amazing leader, to reach 17.8 gigawatts by 2023. And our distributed generation has grown by 17% just in the last year. What an incredible impact she's made for us and for the future, and that's just one example of how those ripples grow. So we're looking forward to hearing from Jennifer, and she will be interviewed by U of M's inaugural Vice Provost for Sustainability and Climate Action, Shalonda Baker. Shalonda is someone who is not afraid to be inaugural or a first. In fact, she's a trailblazer many times over. She is people-centric in her work and someone who's willing to roll up her sleeves and get involved. She's quick to ask, why do we need to do it that way? And lead a new path when needed. Shalonda comes to us from the Department of Energy, where she served with Secretary Granholm as the first director of the Office of Energy Justice and Equity. Prior to that, she was a professor of law, public policy, and urban affairs at Northeastern University, and she was co-founder and co-director of the Initiative for Energy Justice, which provides technical law and policy support to communities on the front lines of climate change. And those are just a couple of the highlights. So I could go on and on about these two amazing leaders, but I know you want to get to them. So let's welcome to the stage Secretary Granholm and Vice Provost Shalonda Baker.
Wow. Okay. No. Thank you. Allie.
Go blue!
Yes.
It's a cheap shot, I know. You applause line.
It's guaranteed to elicit applause. So welcome to the University of Michigan, Madam Secretary. I'm going to call you that throughout the night. It is so great to have you here, and we have a ton of great questions that have been submitted by members of the audience. But I want to start with a little bit of personal privilege. And the last time we saw each other, we were in Washington, D.C. You were leading the nation's energy transition. As Liesl said, you're the architect of that transition. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you missed the most from your time leading the Department of Energy.
The full Inflation Reduction Act. I say that I know not everybody in here is an energy nerd, but you do know, right, that the Inflation Reduction Act was so critical. It was the biggest investment in clean energy in our nation's history. But I will say this, I'm gonna start us off with a little bit of hope, because if you closed your eyes and pretended that the Inflation Reduction Act was never passed, even the passage of this OBBB, the one, whatever, if you look at the investments in clean energy, yes, it totally disfavors, obviously, wind and solar, and disfavors EVs, and disfavors community and residential solar. But it still has significant investment in long duration energy storage, in enhanced geothermal, in hydroelectric power. So, there are some elements of hope that exist, especially in nuclear, all forms of small modular reactors. There's a nuclear fan over here. So this is still going to move forward. And I miss, definitely, Shalonda, being able to lead an incredible team, of which you were an amazing leader. But I'm confident that the future in clean energy is inexorable.
Well, it was so great to work under your leadership. And, I often say the work continues. Even though we may be in a different policy environment, we are still well on our way to this clean energy transition. And, one of the questions that's really top of mind for so many of the people in this audience is how to navigate this political moment. How do we continue to make the type of progress that is really required right now on clean energy?
Yeah, in light of, right? Well, first of all, there's a lot of places in the United States where this is happening regardless, right? In states, in city. We're here in Ann Arbor. Amazing stuff happening in Ann Arbor in clean energy. But states and the private sector and NGOs are all not taking a back seat. Not all the states, obviously. There's a lot of states that are happy to, lead in other ways. But I am confident that there's all this activity that's happening. And one of the, I think, unintended consequences of the passage of that OBBB and the disincentivizing of solar and wind is that there is a cliff under which you can qualify for the tax credits that existed, right? So there was a 30% tax credit for wind and solar under the Inflation Reduction Act, which will go away. I say will because if your solar project, and again, this is utility scale, if your solar project gets under construction by July of next year, then you have 4 years to complete that project. So what we're seeing is this rush to get these projects under construction so they're in a safe harbor and can access the tax credits. What will that mean? That'll mean that there will be an acceleration of deployment, at least for the next 2 years or so. There will be probably a cliff after that, but all of the entities that do the projections of clean energy and what it will look like in the United States between now and 2030 are actually pretty optimistic about what it looks like. So for example, 2 weeks ago, the Solar Energy Industry Association just put out a report saying what their solar deployment will look like. And by 2030, they expect that they will be deploying, now for those of you, they'll be deploying 250 gigawatts of just solar. Now, and 150 more gigawatts of storage. Now, for those of you who may not, be so big on gigawatts, and who is, unless you're in this industry, the, Hoover Dam equates to 2 gigawatts. So we will have added to our nation's electric grid just in solar by 2030, 125 solar dams worth of power, of clean power, regardless of what is happening in the next 1,208 days. It's happening, people.
It is so happening, and you just reminded me of your countdown clock at your office at DOE, and how you really put us to the task, counting down every single day. We have 900 days left. We have 800, it was really a great way to have perspective on the work ahead. So you were also at Climate Week in New York, and what was the word on the street? I mean, you've given us a very hopeful outlay of what's coming by 2030. I ran into some great colleagues, former colleagues from DOE there. We hugged, but we're all continuing to stay committed to this work. Yeah. What was the vibe in the places you were?
You go to Climate Week, and of course everybody's like determined, and it's sort of the vibe is in the solar and wind industry, the sort of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So yeah, they'll take away the tax credits, but we are determined because the market will make this decision. And as Liesl was pointing out, now solar plus storage and wind plus storage are cheaper than in most places, not in all places, but in most places, than natural gas, certainly than coal, than all the other forms of energy. So the market's going to be making this happen regardless. So there was a real sense of we are going to move this forward, or the market will move this forward, or other countries are doing their part to address climate change. Obviously, climate change it doesn't have no geopolitical lines. So if other countries are stepping up to do their part, that's a good thing for all of us. So there was a real sense of optimism. And I don't want to be Pollyanna or anything, because obviously there's real sense of how furious people are that this incredible effort at adding power was at least tried to be kneecapped. But I don't think it's not going to be successful.
Well, so let's drop down a little bit. I mean, I know a lot of the folks who go to Climate Week are those who've had the benefit of sitting at the tables you've sat at in your career, but there are a lot of us who don't have those benefits, and folks in the audience are really wondering how they can stay engaged and how maybe they should be preparing for the next bite at the apple. So I think that's a two-part question. So one, what should they be doing now to continue to sort of advance this clean energy transition? Ordinary citizens, right? Members of the community.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great place. I'm sure that there's a lot of people here who probably live in Ann Arbor, and you guys are doing amazing work. But for folks at the local level, if I were you, Shalonda Baker, I would want to run to be a mayor right now.
Don't try to put that on me.
Mayor Baker. Because honestly, you could campaign on every, a chicken in every pot, a solar panel on every roof. We're going to be 100% clean by 2035 in this city, and figure out a way to get there.
Right.
In partnership with utilities, et cetera. But there's a lot going on. And so one of the things I would advocate for, and I think Ann Arbor is doing a good job at this, is like collapsing permitting times for solar rooftop, for adding solar rooftop. But certainly not every city has that. I would take advantage of the technology, including the AI, et cetera, that's out there, to really make it easy to eliminate the soft costs associated with adding clean energy to one's home, or energy efficiency to one's home. I think at the local level,
right.
In the laboratories of democracy at the states, it's true with the cities too. And when you look at like the city of Burlington, Vermont, they've been at 100% clean electricity since 2009. And guess what? Their rates have not gone up since 2009. So you could run on never raising utility bills.
It's not happening.
I'm running your campaign.
Well, I'll take that offer, but definitely not running for office anytime soon.
I heard the soon part, so I'm...
Well, so, ma'am, I want to talk a little bit about the community
I'm
piece.
looking at you, Jim Mulhern.
Communities have been so central to all of your work throughout your career, and certainly during the energy transition that we were leading at the Department of Energy, you were really laser focused on the true benefits that could be derived from this clean energy transition. And in fact, you've said the clean energy transition is, quote, the greatest economic opportunity of our lifetimes. And so we also know there are two sides of that, right? There are communities who feel they may be left behind, and those communities also tend to be overly impacted by legacy pollution and legacy infrastructure. And then there are communities who are saying, how do we get in on this, right? And how do we ensure that we are also a part of that through job creation, through all of the economic benefits that come out of that? So how would you unpack your statement, your quote, which is this opportunity that we face?
Okay, first of all, I'm going to get to that in one second, but I mean, it's a $28 trillion global market to produce the means to get us to a clean energy future, whether you're building, electric vehicles or batteries or the supply chains or solar panels or whatever. So it is a huge opportunity, and we can either be buying it from somewhere else or we can be producing it. You are the one I should ask this question of, because when Shalonda Baker came to the Department of Energy, she did something we had never done before, which was for every grant that was competed for, part of the condition of the grant, the people who were seeking grants, was that they had to enter into a community benefit plan or a community benefit agreement to make sure that the community was on board. And honestly, it's obviously morally right to do that because the community is affected, but it's also strategically right because you eliminate the friction when a lot of these projects come in. There's not lawsuits, et cetera, when the community's at the table. And the community can negotiate for the benefits. Maybe it's jobs. A percentage of the jobs go to that community. Maybe it's, reduction in pollution. Maybe it's kids get college scholarships. Whatever it is that the community decides is important, this is what Shalonda did at the Department of, it was a full-scale change, and it was not easy, right? Because you were coming into a legacy system.
I think all the gray that's currently in my head is from that work. Yeah.
But say a word about how you see it, your legacy, and how that can be replicated even without the big hand of the federal government.
Yeah, I mean, often when I was in that role, people would ask, okay, what will happen to all of this that you've built when or if a new administration, takes office? How will you maintain that, or what is the department supposed to do? And I began to answer in a way that really took a longer view, and that was, I'm not actually here to change the Department of Energy. I'm here to change the entire energy sector. And so I had a bigger goal in mind, and we actually did do that. I mean, we sort of changed how companies should be looking at development, broadly speaking, and communities now understand that they're entitled to get something. When a large project comes to their communities, they should be getting jobs, they should be getting the true economic benefits from that project. And so I think in many ways we changed the conversation, and you're not taking as much credit as you should take. I mean, you created the space for that to happen.
It was in combination of, the Inflation Reduction Act added sort of bonus credits, tax credits. So if that 30% tax credit that I talked about for solar, for example, if you located your project in a disadvantaged community, you get another 10% of a bonus. If you pay prevailing wage, you got another 10% bonus. You could get like a 50 to 60% tax credit for your project by locating in a community that otherwise might have been left behind. And as a result, like 70% of the investments went to disadvantaged communities. So when you combine that with the community benefit agreements, it was an amazing movement that was happening, and communities felt uplifted. And I regret that we only had 4 years, but I do think it's a model for the future.
Well, so let's talk about the future a little bit. And I actually don't think it's our last bite at the apple. So, even though we did a lot of work, we made a lot of progress, I'm not done with that work. I don't think we are done. I don't think communities are done with that work. But I want to shift to a new area. So data centers have been on everyone's lips. On this campus, in any newspaper you read, there's talk about data centers. I know you're really interested in this area. Lots of folks are obviously concerned about some of the economic or some of the environmental impacts, energy impacts. But I was wondering if we could start by talking about some of the upsides as you see them. and then link that maybe to the community benefits conversation we were just having.
First of all, we don't know. We know that we're going to need more power for these data centers. We're just not sure how much. So if you look at the studies, they range from, by 2030, we're either going to need 30 gigawatts, 15 Hoover Dams worth of power, or we're going to need 130 gigawatts by 2030. And of course, it goes up from there. And so the question is, can the data centers actually be an ally in driving clean energy deployment in the United States, right? And most of these hyperscalers are eager to do that because they do not, their hair is on fire. They don't want to see communities turning them down. So we are now seeing the hyperscalers sign these green power purchase agreements, and they're willing to pay a little bit more to make sure that they're fully powered by clean energy. And for some of them, that might mean solar and storage. Some of it might be small modular reactors in nuclear. Some of it might be enhanced geothermal, one of my favorites. It might be, it's a different configuration, but the bottom line is they have promised their shareholders that their operations will be clean. And so they want there's, as I was saying to you earlier, there's a lot of wildcatters out there. And so they may not have the same shareholder commitments as most of the big tech companies that you have heard of, but they are not backing off those commitments. And so that's number one, is encouraging. What they're willing to do is to pay that, to bring their own power, BYOP or BYOG, bring your own generation, to a data center. That's good. The second thing that I'm excited about is that these huge data centers, they might be a gigawatt data center, it's a big data center, but if they allow the local utility to use that data center to turn on the dimmer switch when they need more power, then the data center actually becomes a grid asset. So for example, your utility grid, as some of you know, is built for the worst case scenario. So your poles and your wires, your distribution and transmission, it is built for when maximum heat or maximum cold. But so right now, as we sit, it's only probably operating at 50% capacity. If we're smart and we use large loads like this as grid assets, that means you won't have to build a bunch of new poles and wires, that you just get an agreement with the data center that at less than 1% of the year, maybe 1/2%, they turn down or they move loads to some other place that isn't in crisis, or they decide to defer, the uploading of cat videos or whatever, to dial it down a little bit to allow the extra power to go where it's needed, to people. If you get that kind of agreement, so in California, the CEO of PG&E has done a study on this, and she is begging, her name is Patty Poppy, and she used to be here, as a matter of fact, some of you know. She is begging for data centers to come to her region because the study that she has shows that for every gigawatt of new demand from data centers, assuming she can get this agreement with them, that reduces consumer bills by 1%. So the man bites dog story, if it's done right, is not that your bills go up and you're paying these big tech companies for their use of your power, but in fact, they come and they lower your rates. That's the optimistic and the hope, and that's what the data centers companies themselves are saying they want to lead. They want to come to a community and guarantee that the rates don't go up. In fact, they may come down.
And so I'm seeing some public policy people in the audience, and so I'm going to ask questions I know that are just floating above their heads.
Yes.
What are the levers to get there? Is it a policy intervention? Is it sort of a regulatory intervention? Is it more of a legal one?
Okay.
First of all, how do we build that out?
We really do need to take a good look at how we regulate utilities in this country. Oh, look at this. So, as you know, clearly, because you're applauding, utilities are rewarded for how much transmission, distribution, and generation they build out, and they get a rate of return on how much they build, not how much they conserve, not how wisely they use the existing system, but how much they actually build, and that gets socialized across your rates. What if, instead of that, or in addition to that, because sometimes you do need to build, obviously, but that they are incentivized to save you money. So that they are rewarded for using these what are known as grid enhancing technologies, GETs, grid enhancing technologies that allows for us to put twice the power by using what are known as advanced conductors, basically lines that are much more efficient, that can shoot twice the power on an existing electrical line than currently exists. What if they were rewarded for that? Currently, in most places, they're not rewarded for that. What if they were rewarded for being able to use more capacity on that 50% of the grid that they aren't already using? And they have a smart grid. They move power when it's needed, where it's needed, rather than just build out for the worst case scenario every time. If that is allowed, it allows for potentially a savings of 30 to 40% on the grid build out from what it would have otherwise been. When you combine that with potentially using these large loads, as well as, you all know do you know what a virtual power plant is? Some of you do, some of you may not. Yes, applaud the virtual power plant. And it basically is, if you've got, if you've got an electric vehicle and you have bi-directional charging, so you can take from the grid and you can send to the grid, all of these collection of EVs and EV batteries create a virtual power plant. And in California, they just did an experiment with this where they combined all these EV assets, if you will, and they got, in an emergency, 500 megawatts from that virtual power plant. That can be replicated all over the place if the incentives are in the right place. And so regulatorily, I think there needs to be a shift.
So I think that was an applause line myself. Well, so, I mean, you're essentially talking about the performance-based rate making that some states have started to experiment with. One student, Wege Joe, is really concerned about the use of fossil fuels to power data centers. And so you've talked about how we can sort of create performance-based, incentives within the utility structure. Is there an answer on data centers? And I know you're a lawyer, so I think about data centers as, how do we think about them as a regulatory object? I mean, are they just a big power suck, or are they something?
Well, that's why I think entering into an agreement, whether it's the utility, the community, with the data center about what they will actually bring to the community rather than just take from the community. And I can say these data centers, they see this happening all across the country, that city councils are denying permits because of this fear, understandable, that the rates are going to go up or that more fossil fuels will be brought in and that everyday citizens will have to pay for it. So there's a whole shift, and I work with a number of entities right now, both on the utility side and on the data center side and on the NGO side. And in Climate Week, this was all the talk, is how do we make sure that data center demand does not cause rate increases and furthers the build out of clean energy and not fossil energy. And one thing I would say on this, here too, in addition to shareholders that they've committed a clean energy future to, the market will be very helpful, because at this moment, wind and solar are the cheapest form of energy in most places. Natural gas is the next. Natural gas as a fossil fuel, the challenge for this is that the turbines that produce natural gas, that generate natural gas, those turbines are now about 40% more than what they were before tariffs and before supply chain issues. So now natural gas becomes more expensive as a solution for this. And you have to wait 4 or 5 years now to get a turbine. So if you're a data center and you want to go fast and you want to go the least expensive, you're going to use clean energy and storage. And that, to me, is one of the ways this is going to happen. None of them are going to use coal. Coal is too expensive.
Right.
It's just, it's not economical at all. It's really a choice between, do they get in line to get a natural gas turbine or a small modular reactor, but those are probably not going to be built until the early 30s, because we haven't built a single small modular reactor in the United States, even though there are all these designs that have been approved. So that's going to take a little bit of time. Some of these tech companies have already done contracts with enhanced geothermal companies. Enhanced geothermal, I love this because the heat beneath your feet right now, everywhere, it exists everywhere in the country. And the question is, how far do you have to go down to be able to extract that? And you can do utility scale enhanced geothermal, and it has no waste. It is a baseload clean energy source. So they're all experimenting with all of these different types of technology, including hydroelectric power, which is, of course, dams, getting energy from dams. So it's an exciting moment to see what emerges. But I think that the fossil fear is less salient than you might think.
Okay, well, there's another fear, which is that communities will be left behind. The communities are going to be excluded, that they're not going to be at the table as these data centers come into their communities, that maybe there's some backroom deals happening. In some of your conversations with industry and with other policymakers, how are they thinking about that inclusion piece? And this comes straight from the audience. How are they thinking about equity and inclusion? And of course, I see a clear parallel to our energy transition, but the data center piece is intricately linked to that. So how do we, what's being talked about?
And I honestly think that you're going to see when local communities say, not in my backyard, to these data centers, it is like a flare for them all. There's a ripple across all of these companies that want to do this, knowing that they better get in and get with communities if they want to be accepted. They're already on their back foot on it, but they do have a good story to tell if they come in saying, we're going to bring power, we're going to benefit the community, we're going to give you jobs, we are going to make sure that that your water use, because water is a big issue for many communities, and there's technology answers to that. There's circular water use, et cetera. So they're very attuned to this, and it's a moment for communities to really stand up and say, we are here, and we want to be at the table if you are to come. And that's why city councils right now are really quite empowered to make that call.
Well, so thank you for that segue, actually. You, ma'am, were the governor of this great state, and I'm going to quote someone who talked to me earlier today saying, oh, I can't wait to hear her speak. She was the one governor who showed me how transformative a governor can be in the state of Michigan. So you have quite a few fans out there. And so pulling on this thread that we've been talking about sort of local community engagement and all of these transitions that are taking place, when you look out in the state of Michigan and think about the opportunities that are here, how would you characterize them? On the clean energy front, on the data center development front, and how would you say communities could harness those opportunities?
Well, I mean, people should know that Michigan, since 2020, Michigan has been the #1 state for clean energy manufacturing projects. You've got, since 2021, 74 projects have come to Michigan to build the means for us to get to net zero. A lot of that is EVs and EV batteries and the supply chain for EV batteries, but it's also other stuff as well. And why did they choose Michigan? Obviously, the incentives from the Inflation Reduction Act were very helpful, but they could go anywhere, right? Why did they come to Michigan? And I think they came, first of all, you do have a great governor, and you've got great leadership here. Great leadership here. But you've got, Michigan is kind of unique. I've seen a lot of states and what they do with economic development. And Michigan is really unique because it's Michigan Economic Development Corporation. It really does. It's really strategic about focusing on sectors that you have a comparative advantage in. And obviously, Michigan has a comparative advantage in electric vehicles, right? But you have an advantage, and I remember when I was governor too, we were focused on diversifying into clean energy, not just the next Auto 2.0, but also why wouldn't we be the place to be able to build other products for this clean energy transition? You know, at the time, we had solar companies, we had wind companies building out. We had companies that were supplying anode, cathode, separator material, electrolyte for the batteries, for the EV space. We had all this stuff. But that has only accelerated because there's a wraparound strategy here for economic development and for having an embrace for companies and communities to say, we want jobs. And you have this incredible workforce in Michigan that knows how to build stuff.
Yeah.
And so the challenge, can I just throw in a bit of frustration, not about Michigan, but about the federal strategy currently.
Careful.
Is this going to hurt the University of Michigan if I criticize?
Not at all.
What I'm really frustrated by is this, the current administration says that they want to be able to attract all these manufacturing facilities to the United States and reshore. I'm all about that, obviously. We are all about that in Michigan. We've been through the mill on losing manufacturing jobs. But when you decide that you're gonna, for example, take away the tax credits that would increase demand for electric vehicles, which today, by the way, is the last day. If you haven't gotten your tax credit or your EV, you know, but if you decide you're going to do that, and you've seen all of the build out of these battery companies, including in Michigan, for building electric vehicle batteries, and you don't want to cede the territory to China, why would you take away the demand for this product? Who's going to build it here if there's less demand for it? Where EVs now used to be like a year ago that by 2030, 50% of the new cars sold would have been EVs, and Michigan would have really benefited from that. Now it's halved as a result of the taking away of the consumer incentives. And what do the battery companies do? Well, they've started building. Are they gonna leave stranded assets because nobody's gonna have an uptake for EVs? It's just so frustrating. And when you say you want to beat China, right now BYD, which is a major Chinese auto company, is the #1 seller of electric vehicles in the world, the #1 seller. So what are we doing here? We're ceding our ability to at least be independent and not only subject to China's control over this. And China was very smart about this. So, you know, China controls totally the EV battery space and the critical minerals that go into batteries, the processing particularly of them. Well, a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago, they banned the export of some critical minerals, germanium, gallium. And where are we going to get it if they're the only place? So does that mean that we end up bending the knee to one of our economic adversaries, if you will, so that we can get the supply we need to be able to build here? Anyway, my point is, it's a really backwards strategy, what is happening right now, if we really want to have the ability to build all of our supply chains for our clean energy future.
So I see our clock, and we're running a little
I didn't mean to bring us down.
No, you're totally fine. I want to ask one more quick question, and then a couple others that people have at the top of their mind. So you were starting to allude to this sort of strategy that's in place right now in Washington, and our student Crystal Zhao asks, in an era where anti-science, anti-intellectual rhetoric is so prominent, how can we continue to ground in reality? So some of the data points you were pulling out kind of point to the sort of not illogical nature of some of the policy choices. So how do we continue to move forward with science at the heart, with sort of intellectual
honestly,
rigor at the heart of it?
This is why universities are so important to continue to educate students, and for these next leaders, the students who are here, so important that we do not that we don't buy into this rhetoric. If you believe that science should be at the forefront and that we're not, telling I mean, anyway, I think it's just really important to continue to do the work at the local level. There was a lot of talk during Climate Week about the fact that, there's all of this talk up here, but underneath, all of this stuff is happening. And that stuff has to continue to happen. So educating and, holding up messengers that people trust in their storytelling. I mean, I was meeting with some students today who were in the space of storytelling and how do you tell the story, but really uplifting those trusted folks. Doctors are trusted. Folks who get solar panels who can talk about how their bill has been reduced are trusted. It's not politicians or anything. It's the people who are experiencing it and the messengers who they believe in, like physicians, like professors. Some people like professors, some may not, but I like them.
Everyone
Don't
loves
get me wrong. But you have to identify who your local messengers are, but keep the work going and do not despair. I mean, we cannot fall into despair. I know, looking at the TV every night, it makes people's hair stand on end because you cannot understand where we are. But we have to not succumb to despair. We have to continue to move forward in these days.
Thank you for that one. So you mentioned New York Climate Week, but we have our own Climate Week this week, and it's very much being driven by the vision of students, of their leadership. And you are a phenomenal leader. You're the best person I've ever worked for in my career. Aww. So, yes, come on. But so we are grooming leaders here. That's our job as educators. What do you think is the most important thing for this next generation of climate leaders who we are trying to groom and shape?
You remember, I used to tell our team, this, and I'm inspired by it, so I'm going to tell you all this, and hopefully you can, there's a lot of talk today about a warrior ethos, but I find that to be a warrior for the planet is really, really important. And when Nancy Pelosi tells this story, that when she visited a bishop in South Africa, on the wall of the bishop's office was this prayer. And the prayer goes, "When at last I stand before the face of God, God will say to me, 'Show me your wounds.' And if I have no wounds, God will ask, 'Was there nothing worth fighting for?'" So at the end of the day, I hope we all bear the scars from the wounds that we have earned on behalf of the people on the planet that we live on.
Yes. Thank you. So one more question for you. This question goes to what we're fighting for. And Secretary Granholm, you have spent your career shaping energy and climate policy. You're now a grandmother.
I am.
And your grandkids are going to grow up in a world that's radically different from the one you and I inhabit now. But we're all fighting for something. And so I'd love for you to paint that vision of the energy system of the future that we are fighting for. What does it look like? What does it feel like?
By God, it's going to be better than the one we have now.
Okay.
I am excited by this question because,
good.
I mean, like all of you, I see a few gray hairs out here, all of you who have the privilege of having grandchildren, you obviously, or children, you want it to be better, right? We're put on this planet to do something more than serve ourselves. We're put it on to make it better. I'm super inspired by the hope that surrounds the technological movement forward on energy. I think that, instead of being fearful, and we have to be fearful, there has to be containment around AI, for example, but AI can also be in real service to this clean energy future I'm not just talking about the data centers. I'm talking about actual applications. So, we have 2.5 terawatts of power waiting to get onto the electricity grid right now, but they're locked in these interconnection queues. 2.5 terawatts, that's basically double the size of the existing grid of clean power waiting to say, let me on, and they're locked in these interconnection queues. And AI is working on that. And as today, it may take a few years for a project to get it off the queue and onto the ground. AI is making that, or will make that, maybe weeks. AI will solve the permitting problem that everybody keeps going, well, when is Congress going to solve the permitting problem? AI is going to solve that. And it's going to take permitting while still respecting NEPA and the environmental laws that a lot of that permitting was designed to address. AI will, I think, be able to really collapse permitting times. At Climate Week, or just after Climate Week, there's a guy who was the founder of Google DeepMind. His name is Mustafa Suleyman, and he wrote a book called The Coming Wave. And if you haven't read it, I really recommend it. But what he says is that within 20 years, we will see 100 times, not percent, 100 times drop in increase in power, but drop in cost because of technologies like fusion energy. So I view this next wave of technology as being technology that will allow us to have free, abundant, clean energy so that we won't have to have these conversations, and that our children and grandchildren will be able to focus on other ways of saving our civilization. But this will not be one of them.
Okay, you heard it. That's it.
Thank you so much. Give it up for Shalonda Baker.
Oh my gosh. Great.
Good to see you guys. My whole family's down here.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. We appreciate you being here for our annual Wege lecture. One more round of applause for Secretary Jennifer Granholm.